from Paris.
We can hear you. Please, over to you, please.
Thank you very much for the organizers and congratulations. Very, very interesting presentation since the beginning of this event. Okay, the purpose of our presentation today is to discuss a little bit more specifically CCUS, the role and challenges of CCUS, and put CCUS in the global context of the energy transition. The key message is that CCUS is today in a kind of early development phase. It's quite fascinating to see where the development of CCUS can take us. But I think it's also very important to understand the challenges and the conditions, and especially the cost issue of CCUS. And we need to address this issue, and it's one of the purpose of this presentation. Before we address directly CCUS, let me give a little bit of a flavor of IFP. We are part of the IFP group. IFP used to be the French Petroleum Institute. Now it's called IFP Énergie Nouvelle, which means new energy. And the change of name of IFP to IFP-EN symbolizes the turn towards the energy transition. And the change of name occurred in 2010, which means it's quite a history behind us of shifting IFP towards the energy transition. Today, energy transition represents roughly 60% of the R&D efforts of the IFP. IFP is the fourth French patent owner related to decarbonation. And I believe France is the second country in EU for decarbonation patents. There are four main topics, or three main topics we can, to simplify in this energy transition research effort of IFP. Number one is sustainable hydrocarbon. How can we contribute through technology to decarbonize operations upstream, downstream, midstream? How can we develop eco-efficient processes in refining and petrochemistry, develop e-fuels, and develop the recycling of plastics? The second topic is renewable energy. IFP has considerable research on wind and marine energies, biofuels, biogas, geothermals, hydrogen production and use, energy storage, and circular economy. And all these are components of renewable energy transition. And finally, the last important aspect is low carbon mobility. There is a tremendous revolution going on, and we will see effects, enormous effects in every part of the world regarding the introduction of electric mobility, regarding the introduction of hydrogen mobility and connected mobility. And it's one of the pillars of the IFP research. Now, if we return to CCUS, CCUS is definitely a cornerstone of our approach to decarbonation, because we need CCUS for sustainable hydrocarbon. We need CCUS for renewable, particularly as a complement to blue hydrogen development, and also as relation to mobility, especially hydrogen-related mobility. So the IFP covers R&D in all topics from capture technology, capture research to storage. We are involved in large international CCUS program, European, but also trans-European, trans-continent research programs. And it's very important that CCUS implies a very deep integration of a large array of technical expertise and industrial experience, which spans from gas treatment, catalyzer technology, geoscience, reservoir engineering, EOR, and production engineering. So all these disciplines under the same roof. Now, we IFP provide technologies and expertise specifically designed for CCUS, which we will present in a couple of seconds. Number one is capture process and CO2 capture expertise through our affiliate Axens. Axens is a technology provider, a license provider, and they have around 200 CO2 capture references in the world. And we, Beicip Franlab, we provide expertise in the area of CCUS reservoir screening, reservoir evaluation, injection, storage studies, integrity evaluation, CO2, EOR, etc. So together, we cover and we offer these solutions to our customers, oil and gas industry and also heavy industry. The next slide is probably familiar to you. It's the IEA growth scenario of the stored CO2 volumes, which in their 2020 net zero 2050 scenario is supposed to reach incredible amounts of up to 7-8 gigaton per year. And we see that the heavy components in this growth is in the yellow color. It's the industry contribution, then seconded by fuel supply contribution and electricity and power sector. So there is no rule that whether you discuss the details of the figures or not, but there is a growth ahead of us, a formidable growth, and this growth will change all CO2 intensive industries. Now we see that the most difficult part of this is how to start. That is the next 10 years. We are now in a situation where the amount stored is very, very low. And we have to think about and create the conditions for this growth to happen. And if you look at this growth, these conditions must be created in the next 10 years. To make this scenario happen, we have 10 years to create the conditions to make this development a reality. So it's a kind of race between the CCUS implementation and massification on one hand, and on the other hand, the climate constraints. And the means by which we can create this development is regulation and also incentives and ways to solve the problem of the cost. And I will now leave the floor to my colleague, Martin, who will discuss a little bit the cost aspect of CCUS. Martin?
Okay, thank you, Jean. Hello, so here you can see on this chart the typical cost of CO2 capture versus the sector. So you can see the cost here in USD per ton, and here this is the sector. So what we can observe is that the cost is highly depending on the concentration, CO2 concentration. So you can see in dark blue, this is the activity with high CO2 concentration, and in light blue, the activity with low CO2 concentration. So what we can see also is that the cost for natural gas processing and coal to chemicals are very low. And this is what we believe should be considered as a target one for CCUS. This is, by the way, already the case in many projects, and particularly for new projects that now include CO2 capture plan from the beginning. The target two will be ethylene, bioethanol, ammoniac, and the target three is, as Jean mentioned, will be for the power and heavy industry. These costs are pretty high. We will see the global picture of the cost in the next slide, and this is where is concentrating now the research and where there is the biggest investment in research. So we have seen the cost of the capture, but for the CCUS project, there is other costs. So the transport and storage cost depends, of course, of the situation. For the lowest case, you can consider US, for example, which is onshore field. There is already pipeline. So in this case, we can consider a cost between 5 and 15 USD per ton of CO2. And we can give you another example where we are from 15 to 14 USD per ton of CO2 for the UK offshore. And this is not the highest cost because UK offshore is pretty favorable case since we are they are planning to reuse the infrastructure. So globally, if we look at the typical cost for a capture and storage project, we are around from $100 to $200 per kilo per ton. So, except for gas treatment and CO2 EOR, total cost of CCUS are generally higher than the current CO2 tax or tax credit where such system exists. In US, tax credit is currently $50 per ton of CO2. In UE, it was last year around 25. This year it's 60, but it's moving towards up to 100 in 2030. And what we can see now in Norway is that they are planning a CO2 tax credit of more than $200 per ton of CO2. So we can imagine that in the future, the cost of the CCUS will decrease and the cost of tax, the CO2 tax will increase. So at one point, it will become logical to go for CCUS. What we can mention is that we can see a trend in US and in Europe for mega CCUS hub projects. They are looking for scaling gains. But what we can see that it requires large subsidies to get started. For example, the well-known Northern Lights project, it's a project which received 80% of the support from Norway authority. And ExxonMobil have launched our proposal recently, very huge, I will say huge, CCUS project, but it requires more than $1 billion investment. Okay, so I just wanted to show in this slide a good example of the national plan of a national plan. So this is the one of UK, which is considered one of the most mature in the world. So what we can see, this is what you can see here is the shape, the learning curve. So in the next decade, we are going to have a small increase, then we will change the shift, the trend of the curve, and we will have an increase. This project is based on the idea of building up to 20 individual CCUS sites. And the idea is, as I already mentioned, to use existing offshore infrastructure. So in this case, they will use the platform. They are planning to use the well and the pipeline. But just to be clear, they are planning to inject in saline aquifer, which won't be in the reservoir, which was previously exploited. The idea also of UK is to develop a higher storage capacity than the carbon they are going to inject, and so to have a business plan to import CO2. This is rather a win-win situation for the oil and gas industry in the North Sea, because they will keep using their installation and they will avoid decommissioning cost in the near future. So we have talked about the CCUS challenge, which is the most important CCUS challenge, which is the cost. But when you are going to perform a CCUS project and when you are looking at the feasibility study, there is many questions you have to think about. So of course you have to think about the CO2 source. At the beginning you know it, but when you are thinking about your project, you can imagine to consider different CO2 source. So that's an idea that one of the first steps is to map CO2 source next to your project. After that, you have to look at the transport, and you have to screen the solution. There is no evidence situation. For example, in the project we are working in UE, ship are considered. Sometimes it's pipeline. So really, there is not a unique answer. I would like just to focus on where to store. I'm a reservoir engineer, so just wanted to mention that it's not exactly the same problem that we have when we are producing oil and gas. One of the most important problems for CCUS is the integrity. So when it's a depleted gas, so you can be confident, depleted gas field, you can be confident on the fact that there is a trap. But in this case, you have to really focus on the well integrity and on the fact that you maybe have to upgrade the ancient infrastructure. So I'm seeing that we are running out of time, so I won't go further on this, just to mention that when, for us from the oil and gas industry, the first things you have to look when you are considering CCUS is utilization for EOR CO2. That's could be a really good option. Often there is a lack of CO2, but in this case you could look at the CO2 sources and perform this iterative work I was thinking about. And last point on this slide, we really want to mention that there is a lot of potential problem, and we recommend to perform a pilot or at least extensive and a pre-feasibility study. I will go quickly on this. I just wanted to mention that we have here in IFP several technologies for carbon capture. One of them is for high pressure natural gas or syngas. It is widely used for capture. The fact is not for now the CO2 which is captured is often not stored, so this is the next step, I will say. And we have this DMX project. We are working with ArcelorMittal and IFPEN and Total Energy. So I will just mention this project because a lot of people are talking about CCUS, but actually there is very few real projects. So in this case, this is a real project, I will say, which is currently implemented. You can see here the installation, and this is the plant of ArcelorMittal. So the idea is to capture the CO2 from the flue gas, and then to ship in saline aquifer next in Norway. So Jean, I will let you the floor for the final remark.
Well, CCUS is a proven technology. CCUS is in an early stage of development. That means commercial realization can be started and have started since long time when economics allow so. But elsewhere, public policies play a very important role to allow this early development phase to take place through tax incentives or direct subsidies. We believe massification of CCUS will happen in 2030s, which will lead to a new business, new export and trade routes, constitution of mega-scale regional CCS hubs, and which will have far-reaching implications for industry and power sectors. And we at IFP Group are fully engaged in this CCUS revolution. We need innovation, we need R&D, we need pilots, we need expertise, and we are committed to provide this, all this to the world. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. It's